All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And I declare that we do have quorum. Member Kenneth Donald is at home, so he is joining us virtually. Everyone else is here. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robertson-Huron Treaty Number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred spaces, and take actions towards real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations. And with that, moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Brandon Stapleton, be it resolved that the Committee of Adjustment agenda dated October 12, 2022 be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. All in favor? And that's carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Mr. Stapleton.
For the first application, McGregor and Temple.
All right, thank you. Seeing no others. Moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Helena Renwick. Be it resolved that the Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes dated September 14, 2022, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. All in favor? And that's carried. All right. I'd like to welcome everyone to the public meetings to consider applications for minor variances to the zoning bylaw. The input received by agencies, public, and staff is important in order for the committee to make sound planning decisions. The procedure to be followed in these meetings will be as follows. A brief explanation of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or the representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present in person or electronically will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting the applications. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and mailing address, and please note the presentations are limited to 10 minutes. Once the hearing is concluded, the input received will be considered by committee prior to making a decision on the applications, and if you wish to be notified of a decision of the committee, you must file a written request for notification. And with that, we're moving on to our first application. Madeline is going to speak to the Temple and McGregor application.
Good morning, committee. I'll just take a second to set up the presentation.
Sure.
Should be all good. Through you, Mr. Chair, the subject property is located at 309 Seeley's Road. The lot is designated waterfront in Huntsville's official plan and zoned Shoreline Residential 1 under Huntsville's zoning bylaw. It should be noted that the Town of Huntsville Community Planning Permit Bylaw was passed by Council in July 2022, but is currently under appeal and not yet in full force and effect. The subject lands are contained within the waterfront residential 60-meter precinct in the CPP bylaw. The application is to permit the reconstruction of the existing dwelling on the lot and add a covered cantilevered entrance. The dwelling proposed to be reconstructed is considered a legal non-complying structure as it does not comply with the site regulations of the current zoning bylaw. A minor variance is required to recognize the existing 14.6 meter front yard setback for the reconstruction of an 82 square meter legal non-complying dwelling, permit an addition of a 4.5 meter cantilevered deck and a 5 meter squared staircase to a legal non-complying dwelling, and reduce the minimum required front yard setback from 30 meters to 20 meters for a 4.5 square meter cantilevered deck and 5 square meter stairway addition. The minor variance will be conditional on the owner revegetating the shoreline buffer, the dwelling having all openings, windows, and doors being above 282.5 meters above sea level, and being flood-proofed in accordance with the Ontario Building Code, the owner closing the original shore road allowance, and the owner relocating the dock, all to be implemented through site plan control or a community planning permit to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville. Based on the configuration of the property, the proposed reconstruction of the dwelling and deck expansion is sited in the most suitable location. The dwelling maintains the same footprint as the original structure and will be within the height limits of the zone, allowing it to maintain the character of the surrounding neighborhood. As such, the variance requested will not likely result in any significant impacts to abutting landowners. Additionally, a condition to revegetate the shoreline has been added to restore the shoreline to its natural state and to minimize the visual impact of the dwelling. Having regard to the provisions in the community planning permit bylaw, this proposal would be in keeping with the identified precinct and policies contained within the CPP. Providing revegetation of the shoreline is completed to the satisfaction of the town as a condition of permit issuance. Looking at the official plan, the proposed reconstructed dwelling takes advantage of the existing foundation, will allow vegetation retention, and will include works to revegetate on the shoreline. The proposed development also reflects the placement of surrounding development, the character of the existing dwelling, and the residential waterfront character of the area. Natural constraint mapping identifies the lands as being below the minimum building elevation and also identifies the Mary Lake ridgeline. Based on the surrounding area, it has been noted that the most appropriate minimum flood elevation is 282.5 meters above sea level. This has been determined based on site-specific exceptions on neighboring properties, abutting, and across from the subject property. A condition has been added to ensure the minimum building elevation is met and that the dwelling is flood-proofed in accordance with the Ontario Building Code. And it has been confirmed by the applicants and agent that the proposed dwelling will meet the minimum building elevation. As the property is located at the mouth of Mary Lake along the Muskoka River, the proposed development will have no impact to the Mary Lake ridgeline, as the development will occur in a previously cleared area and surrounding vegetation will be retained. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and to the Mary Lake Association. One letter of concern was received from a neighboring property owner in regards to the dock and circulated to committee prior to the meeting. To address the concern, a condition has been added. The application would appear to conform to the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. And additionally, the application appears to satisfy the 4 tests for a minor variance as set out in the Planning Act, and therefore staff are recommending approval. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. I'll call on the applicant or representative. I see a representative, Mr. Gallagher, coming down.
Got it right first time. Thank you, Chair Stone and members of the committee. John P. Gallagher, John P. Gallagher and Associates, 24 Hibbard Road, Huntsville, P1H 1C9. And I'm here representing the Temples, who are looking at tearing down the old cottage and building a permanent house on the North Muskoka River as it flows into Mary Lake. I think Madeline has described the application quite well. As she had stated, the purpose of the application is for the deck and porch over the deck on the east or the westerly side of the building. With the existing cottage, we are basically replacing it footprint for footprint. With the location and using it, it is desirable to use that because we get to use the existing footprint where all the land's been disturbed and the existing dwelling has been sitting for numerous years. It then provides a compact form of development. One of the items that staff had asked for was a revegetation plan, and this site is somewhat void of vegetation, so I've talked to my client about that, and he had no objection to trying to bring it more into conformity with the application or the OP. The location of the building also has lots of separation from the side yard, so it's well in excess of the setbacks as well as the rear yard. There's no other part of the bylaw that we are offending with the request. The principal coverage with that little addition is 4.2, whereas the bylaw allows for 10%. The building has legally existed on the site for many years, and it's logical to allow a replacement in this area. With respect to the flood elevation, we did have John Jackson attend the site last week, I guess. Yeah, last week. And as it turns out, where the house is located is above the elevation of the openings for windows and doors. So we had Carrie Bice do a side profile of the building, show how all that would interface and not create any negative impacts to the site. With respect to the dock, yes, that dock has been abutting for many years, and the owner has agreed to rectify that situation. It does encroach onto the neighbor's lot line extension into the water. So I think as part of the site plan that's required, we will look at putting together a comprehensive plan that addresses revegetation, moving the dock, and ensuring that the elevations are met. I'd be glad to answer any questions should you have any. I think that's it. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. I'll call on any members of the public, either in person or electronically. Electronically, you'll need to raise your electronic hand.
I see no hands raised, Chair, so.
All right, thank you. And I see no one in attendance. Members of committee, any comments or questions? Seeing none. Moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Helena Renwick. Be it resolved that minor variance application A45-2022 HTE be approved. The purpose and effect of which is to provide relief from subsections 3.13.1, 3.13.2, and 5.3.46 of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2008-66P in order to recognize the existing 14.6 meter front yard setback for the reconstruction of an 82 square meter legal non-complying dwelling, permit an addition of a 4.5 square meter cantilever deck and 5 square meter stairway to a legal non-complying dwelling, and reduce the minimum required front yard setback from 30 meters to 20 meters for a 4.5 square meter cantilever deck and a 5 square meter stairway addition. Conditional on the owner revegetating the shoreline buffer, the dwelling having all openings, windows, and doors being above 282.5 meters above sea level and being flood-proofed in accordance with the Ontario Building Code, the owner closing the original shore road allowance, and the owner relocating the dock, all to be implemented through site plan control or the community planning permit to the satisfaction of the town of Huntsville. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried. All right, Brandon's rejoining us again, and Madeline, you're speaking to the next one, Kalon, the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, the subject property is located at 170 Town Line Road East. The lot is designated waterfront in Huntsville's official plan and zoned Shoreline Residential 4 under Huntsville zoning bylaw. The subject lands are contained within the waterfront residential 120 meters precinct in the community planning permit. The application is to permit the construction of a new dock, a dryland boathouse, and recognize a deck at the shoreline on the lot. Each structure requires different variances. In order to construct a 14 square meter dryland boathouse, a minor variance is required to permit a dryland boathouse to be closer to the shoreline than the principal dwelling on the lot, reduce the minimum required front yard setback from 20 meters to 16 meters, reduce the minimum required northern interior side yard setback from 6 meters to 2.4 meters, and reduce the minimum required south interior side yard setback from 6 meters to 1.2 meters. In order to recognize an existing 31.5 square meter deck, a minor variance is required to reduce the minimum required interior side yard setback from 6 meters to 0.6 meters to permit a deck with a deck floor measuring a maximum of 2.74 meters from the grade below it, and increase the maximum floor area from 30 square meters to 31.5 square meters for an unenclosed deck within a yard abutting a shoreline. To allow the existing dock to be expanded, a minor variance is also required to reduce the minimum required interior side yard setback from 6 meters to 1.8 meters for an existing 23 square meter dock, and from 6 meters to 0.6 meters for a proposed 24 square meter dock addition. Finally, a minor variance will be also required to recognize a maximum shoreline amenity area width of 100% of the lot frontage for the proposal. The plans provided include approximate measurements as to where the shoreline structures are located and have not been confirmed by a survey. The applicants were encouraged to provide a more accurate drawing but preferred to proceed with the current sketch. The applicants have provided 2 options for the location of the proposed dryland boathouse in order to allow some variation and flexibility and to see which option would be most desired by the committee. The existing elevated 31.5 square meter deck was constructed without benefit of planning or building approvals and had replaced the previous dryland boathouse and dock, which could be seen in the photos shown. Due to the size and constraint of the shoreline area on the property, the setbacks are unable to be achieved. It should be noted that any development on this portion of the lot would require relief due to the size. The deck that is attached to the dock is considered legal non-complying, and the reconstructed deck requires side yard reductions. Unenclosed decks are permitted within the required yard abutting a shoreline, provided that they do not exceed 30 square meters and are located no closer than 5 meters from the shoreline, except when such deck is attached to a dock, and that the deck floor is no more than 1 meter from the grade below it. In this instance, the deck requires additional relief to increase the maximum floor area and to permit the deck floor to be a maximum of 2.7 meters from the grade below it. The SR4 zone requires a 6 meter interior side yard setback, which also projects out into the water. In this instance, the existing dock crosses the north interior property line. The proposed 24 meter square dock addition will not be permitted unless the existing dock is brought into compliance. The shoreline buffer shall be maintained across a minimum of 75% of the width of a lot and shall maintain a minimum depth of 15 meters measured from the shoreline. In addition to maximum cumulative width of all shoreline structures and amenity areas shall not exceed 25% of that frontage. For this property, given the frontage, the permitted shoreline buffer amenity width would only be 1.6 meters. Due to the configuration of the existing deck, the shoreline amenity width was proposed at 100%. The new deck is proposed to be attached to the existing deck and dock, and due to the location, vegetation will not be able to be planted along the shoreline. If the community planning permit bylaw was in effect, a Class 3 permit approval would be required to authorize this proposal, and a variation from these minimum requirements having regards to the provisions of the CPP. Staff would recommend that committee deny the proposed variation to the waterfront residential 120 meter lot requirement. Looking at the official plan, the waterfront designation anticipates linear, low-density shoreline residential development that respects the character and natural setting. In this instance, the proposal will not change the visual impact from the water, as no mature vegetation to screen the height of the deck or dryland boathouse existed prior to the reconstruction of the deck. Due to the larger lot frontage of neighboring properties and scale of development along this portion of Fairy Lake, the proposal does not hinder the surrounding waterfront residential character. However, it is staff's opinion that the character of the waterfront designation could be more appropriately maintained by reducing the overall scale to preserve the natural environment, particularly related to topography and landscape, vegetation, and natural shorelines. Oh, sorry, these are just additional photos. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and to the Fairy Lake Association. 7 letters of objection were received from neighboring property owners and were circulated prior to the meeting. The Lake Association provided comments objecting to the application, which were also circulated to committee prior to the meeting. The application would not appear to conform to the intent of the official plan, nor be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Additionally, the application does not appear to satisfy the 4 tests for a minor variance as set out in the Planning Act, and therefore staff are recommending denial. If committee sees the application to be favorable due to the constraint in frontage, staff would recommend the following conditions be added to the approval: to require the revegetation of a 20-meter area in depth behind the deck structure to ensure that all areas within the shoreline buffer that are not developed can be enhanced in a natural state. And due to the narrow nature of the property, staff would also recommend a condition that only one 1.5 meter wide, low impact pathway be permitted from Town Line Road East to the shoreline of Fairy Lake. Further, the existing dock should be relocated so that it does not project over the side lot lines and that the structures obtained require permits. Thank you for listening, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks very much. I'll call on the applicant or representative to make any comments. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and council members. Good morning.
Excuse me, can you pull the microphone close to you? We
Sure.
want to make sure we hear you.
My name is Kulbinder Kelly Callan, owner of 170 Town Line Road East, Huntsville, Ontario, P1H1R1. And I will be representing myself and my husband, Surinder Paul Callan, in the matter before you today. Thank you, Madeline, for outlining the application with detail. Essentially, the minor variance proposal is for an additional floating dock and for a dryland boathouse and a deck that were already by the shoreline upon our purchase of the property in May 2021. Originally, the deck had a dryland boathouse on the deck situated at the shoreline, which dates back to 1993. Are you able to pull up? 3 years prior to our purchase of this property, just this one here. Yeah. 3 years prior to.
Pull the microphone a little closer to you?
Sure.
Wonderful, thank you.
3 years prior to our purchase of this property, a tree had fallen on the dryland boathouse, and the owner put in an insurance claim and reconstructed the dryland boathouse at the shoreline with no stop work order issued by the town of Huntsville, nor any opposition from the existing neighbors. These pictures that you can see in front of you were from the Lakelands Real Estate Board archive listings. The left one shows from 1993, the structures that were there at the shoreline up until 2006 when that was listed. And then the picture on the right is the listing from 2021. And as you can see, both the deck and the dryland boathouse at the shoreline look very different and have been altered. But despite this, the wooden deck that the dryland boathouse was on, the footing was not safe when we arrived, and it was not to safe standards. We took the advice, unfortunately, of a local contractor who indicated that securing the footing within the exact same footprint and better decking material would be considered as a renovation and did not require permits. This made, at that time, this made sense to us based on the fact that the previous owner also rebuilt the boathouse without permits, and unfortunately, we trusted this contractor and moved forward, and that was our error. We can go back. Unknown to us up until that time, the structure was not on record with the town of Huntsville. We have made efforts to correct our error of not obtaining a permit by working with the town, but from the very beginning, our trust in both the listing realtor's listing and later our trust in the contractor have betrayed us and caused us great hardships. Here in the original listing of 2021, there's description that states there is a storage bunkie by the water. This has been circulated to council members. As well, under the waterfront section, it states that there is a dry boathouse. In terms of the dryland boathouse, when examining this particular part of this property, the lot is irregular shape and narrow at the shoreline frontage and widens at the road with 209.12 feet of steep elevation. The elevation's between 40 to 60%, as mentioned in Madeline's presentation. The main house across the road up at the top of the hill is approximately 600 feet. And this, in this illustration, you can see that orange line would be the trek that it would take to go from the dock to any storage facility there, which is our lower garage. The area of the entire property totals to about 4 acres, which includes the privately owned road. So this makes storage of basic necessities extremely challenging, even for someone with a physically fit profile. My understanding is there used to be a bylaw which allowed for a dryland boathouse to be situated adjacent to the shoreline. However, at some point in the zoning process, the policymakers have changed the clause to be situated back behind the house, which, given the landscape of our property, would defeat the purpose. Our proposal would help keep the shoreline area aesthetically clean by having a place to store our water equipment for a family of 4, provide storage of maintenance equipment to store an automatic external defibrillator, which we require for a member of our family who has a heart condition. This device needs to be stored in a waterproof area, and in an emergency situation at the dock, it would facilitate quicker response time to save a life. Now, considering the fact that the existing dryland boathouse was on the shoreline, we are requesting that the committee consider option 1 as opposed to option 2. Because of the steepness of the land and the additional time it would take to access an AED or extra exertion to carry and store large and heavy water equipment, option 2 would be less than ideal. With option 1, the dryland boathouse at 15 meters from the shoreline would be barely visible from the dock and from the water, as there is mature vegetation in that area, unlike where the original dryland boathouse was situated. Although the natural landscape prevails, we are in agreement with the planning staff suggestion to plant more vegetation behind the deck to provide a more natural shoreline buffer. With the shoreline frontage at 22.34 feet, we are asking for 100% usage of the shoreline amenity area as it was originally used for decades. This area has always been used at this capacity dating back to 1993, and we purchased it with this usage and would like it to be honored. In terms of the deck, the current deck allows water to run off and permeate through to the soil underneath. The area under and around the existing deck and close to shoreline is wet and spongy. Therefore, originally it was a safety concern, as the original deck stood on 12 by 12 concrete deck blocks at the front, and on the back end, as you can see in this picture, did not allow natural water flow as the northwest corner of the deck was on the ground. Now, however, the current footings of the deck are anchored to the bedrock and supported by additional concrete. The current deck does not interfere with the natural flow. The existing deck has been cut back since by approximately 3 feet to be within our property line, even though we followed the original footprint initially. In terms of the floating dock extension, we're asking for a 16 by 16 dock extension that will be in line with our projected property line, and we intend to bring the existing dock in compliance as recommended in the report. Combined, they will not extend further than 48 feet into the water from the shoreline. So if you see the aerial view attachment number 1, the dock would not be interrupting anyone's docking area and does not interrupt any boating traffic or swimmers because it's further back from the headland. Now I'd like to bring light to the human impact of this application as goal number 6 in Madeline's report, being one of the social considerations that guides the town of Huntsville's Unity Plan that encourages and supports social and cultural diversity. My husband and I are first generation Canadians in our family to ever own waterfront property, or as we call it in Muskoka, a cottage. We are from a racialized and visible minority group that socially and economically have been historically disadvantaged. I would ask the committee to consider our application through the lens of equity, accessibility, and fairness. Given A, the structures that were already on the property prior to our purchase have been there since 1993. B, the constraint of the frontage of this property. C, our willingness to work with the town to remedy the situation despite the fact that it would put us at a greater disadvantage than we purchased the property as, or compared to the owners that preceded us. And lastly, D, the fact that we have the right to enjoy our property and lay down roots here for our children as anyone else does. I would also ask the committee to pay particular attention to the larger picture of what's happening here when considering the letters of opposition and considering the town had no concern regarding the structure for all these years up until now. As you consider the letters of opposition, please consider the following. Attachment number 5 in the report is an email sent by the Fairy Lake Association President Marcia Rao, who stated that they would not support our proposal as they questioned the existing structure was even legal. However, Marcia Rao was the listing agent who sold the property to us in 2021, and as a realtor with Royal LePage under Lakelands Real Estate Board, had listed the structure as a dryland boathouse / bunkie, which contradicts what she has written in her email to the town. Number 2, we have tried hard to put ourselves in our neighbors' shoes so that we can try to mitigate their concerns, but we are truly at a loss. With respect to their concerns about the deck and the dryland boathouse, why weren't any of these concerns brought to the town's attention prior to the purchase of the property? When the previous owner rebuilt the dryland boathouse 5 years ago under an insurance claim, why wasn't there a stop work order issued by the town of Huntsville? Surely the rebuilding of the structure at the shoreline took place in plain sight of all those that oppose our application today. But why weren't they vehemently opposed to it then, or even viewed the structure that was perched on the deck at the shoreline's edge as egregious then?
That's over 10 minutes. If you could
Sorry.
wrap up for me?
I will. Perhaps such inconsistent and unfair behavior and action is fueled by either a lack of comprehension of this proposal or discrimination. I'm disheartened and disgusted, but unfortunately, as a racial minority, we are able to recognize that these letters of opposition are written with discrimination and are fueled by either hate or ignorance. Hence, although the committee is required to examine this matter from zoning and bylaw policies perspective, as well as other factors, I ask the committee to look at the larger picture and create a sense of awareness of the underlying motivation of such opposition and make your decision. It is the committee's ethical and social responsibility to not condone these discriminatory behaviors and treat us with fairness that previous owners of this property have experienced, so as not to put us further disadvantaged as per the
Thank you very
Ontario
much.
Human Rights.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go to members of the public that would like to speak to this, either in person or electronically. Electronically, you'll need to raise your electronic hand. But in person, more than welcome, come on down. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Chair Stone. Committee, Lanny Dennis Planning, Box 254, Novar, Ontario, P0A1R0. I submitted a letter dealing with planning policy on the application in advance of the hearing and represent 5 neighbors. I think the outlined by the planner was a fair and accurate assessment of the proposal. And concur with the planning department to deny the application as the variances individually and collectively, in my opinion, do not pass the 4 tests of a minor variance. Tests 1 and 2. Does the proposal meet the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw? I think we're all aware that the town's official plan ensures that visual and ecological impacts are minimized on waterfront property. It also addresses the character of an area and requires that natural environment prevails over built form. These fundamental principles are implemented through the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw. There are key performance standards that in my opinion, are not maintained and are excessive where development is proposed on a long, narrow strip of land that has only 22.34 feet of frontage on Ferry Lake. The maximum amount of shoreline coverage is 25% to a maximum of 50 feet. In this case, the maximum amount of coverage is 100%, and using 25% as a barometer, this lot would be permitted roughly 5.6 feet of coverage. Should changes to this standard in the official plan, the official plan requires a technical ecological report. I'm unaware of any such study being available or completed. The minimum side yard setbacks are in place to ensure compatibility. The minimum side yard setbacks on the for waterfront structures and mainland structures is 19.6 feet. Given that the lot only has 22.34 feet frontage, there is insufficient width remaining to permit any new structures. The variances requested are fairly large. The new dock requests a setback of roughly 2 feet. In my opinion, it's inadequate for compatibility. I think it's clear that the zoning bylaw does not intend to have shoreline structures that have inadequate frontage for compatibility purposes. In fact, the new dock is coming closer to the side than the existing, creating even more non-compliance situation. It's also doubling in its size. Add in the new deck, existing / proposed deck and dryland boathouse, all with significant side yard reductions. The dryland boathouse is going to 8 feet on one side and 4 feet on the other, and the deck is 2 feet on either side. The amount of mass and bulk built form and human activity has significant impact on abutting neighbors and the shoreline. The amount of built form, in my opinion, is not proportionate to the size and the frontage. Covering 100% of the shoreline leaves no room for green space and can achieve another performance standard having to maintain 75% space within 75% of the green space within 50 feet of the shoreline. Moreover, having insufficient vegetation not only creates deficiency in terms of minimizing visual impact, albeit it was addressed in the presentation, there's actually stormwater runoff that it may be problematic as well. The increase in elevation, as noted on this property, it creates the development, making it higher than even what it really is. So the belt form becomes even more prominent from abutting property owners and the actual shoreline, as you see it from the shoreline. It does not blend in with the natural environment, and in my opinion, it is overbuilt. And included in the staff report actually indicates in the report, however, the entirety of the reliefs requested overdevelopment this portion of the lot, and I would echo that sentiment. On this note, I'd like to add, given the number of variances and their cumulative impact, it would seem more appropriate for a site-specific zoning, given that it seems to be a new zoning being requested. It exceeds and requests a large number of variances to the performance standards through the variance process. Just to give you an idea, and this includes the dock that's out into the water, but the coverage within the first 66 feet is about 84%. Further, on this note, with respect to the character, this is a small frontage lot compared to surrounding larger frontage lots that are able to accommodate sort of typical usual waterfront structures. The development of these lots are able to spread out development along their shoreline versus not being intensified and congested on one small water frontage. The third test, are the variants desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land, building, or structure? The site-specific circumstances don't seem to support the request. I haven't seen any rationale to date, but I listened to the proponent's presentation. It is an extremely narrow lot. While the dock is important to have to have the width, length, and size, it's important to have a dock. The width, length, and size are excessive. Presently, under existing performance standards, no dock would be permitted as they wouldn't be able to meet the side yard requirements. Adding an elevated, oversized deck and dryland boathouse close to the shoreline in this narrow strip of sloped terrain, which increases the prominence of the built form, with existing dwellings located either side with a limited buffer, does not create good site-specific extenuating circumstances to allow the variances. It's simply too much, too close to the shoreline and the neighbors. It seems unreasonable. When looking at the variances related to meeting the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw, they do not reflect the planning policy. The variances, in my opinion, are not desirable for the appropriate development of the lot. As such, the variances are not minor, which is the fourth test, as their unacceptable adverse impacts the true test of a minor variance. I would respectfully request committee deny the application as it does not appear to meet the four tests of the minor variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other member of the public wish to speak to this application? Either in person or online? Are there any hands online?
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
All right. And I see no other members of the public. Committee members, any comments or question? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I guess maybe my question is first for Madeline and maybe to our CBO who's in attendance. Was there ever permits taken or issued for any works done on this property in the last 20 years?
CBO Nagy, I know you have some history on this. If you could relay it all for committee?
Yeah, happy to. So there is a permit in '06 which refers to the existing dock and a small platform at the water's edge only. There's no permits on record for a dryland boathouse or anything with respect to repairs or the actual establishment of it. 93 was the year in which the actual house was built on the property itself. And give me 2 seconds. And then in 99, there was a garage that was constructed up near the house. And in 2011, there was a conversion of an existing deck to a screen porch. So with respect to the waterfront, it's only a floating dock and then a small platform at the water's edge to connect that dock to that area. With respect to the actual structure that's out there right now, there has not been an application for the new structure. And further, the building department has put an order on the structure itself as it was an inconformance, which we are proceeding with through the courts on that, but decision today doesn't have any impact as to that court proceeding. So, yeah.
Follow up, Chair Stone?
Absolutely.
Does the current dock represent what was permitted back in '06?
Would that go to Madeline?
I can
Okay,
take that,
please.
Chair Stone, thank you. So the dock currently crosses the north interior property line, so no, it wouldn't be conforming.
I do have one other, I have a few other comments, which I feel are very important to share with everyone. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the process, but the building department is reactive in this situation when there's things that don't comply. In a perfect world, everyone gets a permit and they do things according to bylaws and the structure of governance. This hasn't been the case, and I think that it's unfortunate. Maybe some due diligence was missed with legals on purchasing and that kind of thing. But I will say that I'm deeply offended to be accused of being racist. I sit here and I volunteer and I am chosen by all my neighbors, friends, people I don't know, to represent them fairly and equitably. And I'm deeply offended.
Any other comments from committee? I see Mr. Donald virtually. No, we can't hear you just yet. 1 second.
Sorry, I guess I double clicked.
There you go.
Thank you, Chair Stone. If this had been a new application, starting from scratch, I think the number of variances being requested would be significantly more than minor, and I'd be, heavily inclined to say deny the application. However, I did take the opportunity to go back on the town's mapping services and look to see that in fact at least a dock existed for many years. Certainly 2013 it was on the map, and I believe in 2008 it was on the map. It's published by the town. So I find myself in a dilemma that we're looking at something where there's obviously some pre-existing use. Given a dock, there's obviously been access to the dock, whether there was a dryland boathouse at that point I'm unable to determine based on the information that's on the mapping website. So it leaves me with a dilemma that we're being asked to look at something where there is pre-existing use, and yet the number of variances, I think, are excessive. Having said that, the applicant's proposal, in my opinion, is to throw a number of things at the wall and see what the committee will accept. And I don't believe that that is our role. I think to say, here's an option, here's an option, here's an option, pick one and then we'll proceed. I don't believe that is our position. And I don't think it's within our mandate to take that position. I think those negotiations should happen between the applicant and the town representatives prior to it coming to committee. So with that in mind, I'm inclined to stand with the town's recommendations that this application be denied. Having said that, I would encourage both the applicant and the town to revisit the issues of prior use and look for ways to resolve the current situation. And I agree with Councillor Fitzgerald's comments that somebody at some point has been misled or has misinterpreted what the property uses should be, and perhaps some due diligence was missed. However, that is now by the by. It's not something that I can take into consideration at this particular point. That is for the applicant to decide whether there's, what the appropriate resolution for them should be. So, sorry, it's rather a rambling comment, but I'm troubled by this one. And but when I take it back to my interpretation of the actual issues, then I stand with the town's position to deny. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Stone. Yeah, I would like to see the applicant attempt to work with planning and building in order to work out something that is, reasonable use of their property. I don't know how we go about this, because if we deny this, the process for them reapplying or doing anything is restrictive, correct?
Can I ask Madeline or Richard to speak to, if this is denied, what happens, how do they come back?
Yes, Chair Stone, I think maybe the most appropriate way to address it would be a deferral. And then the applicants can work with town staff and we can work on refining what their objective is and bring the application back when it's more appropriate.
Is there not a time frame, like a year, before you can revisit something?
Good question. To my knowledge, there's no time frame. The application is submitted, and we've brought it forward to this committee. So the options would be to approve, deny, and you can also defer.
Okay. Councillor Fitzgerald.
It seems to me the applicant has enough hardships associated with this property. If we denied, they would be looking at another application fee, which I think is probably unreasonable at this juncture for them to endure that. So I would say move for a deferral and look at other options.
Ms. Renwick.
I would definitely concur with that. I would second the motion to defer. I am sympathetic to the applicant and what they've had to go through, and it is a very interesting piece of property, and to actually be able to put a boathouse, I would want to have something in that area as well to store pieces, but given that the size and the nature of that property, it's just so challenging. So I do sympathize with your application, but I would second the motion from Councillor Fitzgerald to defer this motion.
All right. Can I just ask staff, has there been discussions about what we could live with as the town plan?
Thank you, Chair Stone. There has been discussion back and forth. I think there's definitely opportunity to refine that discussion. There's a balancing act that we've been trying to think of as well. So, yeah, there's definitely opportunity to bring it back.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I know I'm taking up a lot of time here. I'm not suggesting that a boathouse is the answer. I know there's defib enclosures that are waterproof. We have them everywhere in the province. I have seen kayaks and canoes and other water apparatus stored in smaller containers, that kind of thing. So I think they really have to look at this long and hard to determine what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and come up with a good proposal.
All right, so you do have a motion, is that correct? Kelsey?
Member Kenneth Donald had his hand raised.
Thank you. Mr. Donald?
Thank you, Chair Stone. I would like to encourage both the town and the applicant to separate the issues of who said what in this whole discussion. The applicant would like to be able to use the property the way that they envisage. And I support that within the constraints of waterfront rules, regulations, respect for the environment. And I would encourage the applicant to separate their issues with whether they should be allowed to use the property and the neighbors' opinions about whether they should be allowed to use the property, to clearly delineate that from the discussion that they have with the town, and come back to the appropriate approvals authority under the new CPP, with a proposal that is very clean in terms of, this is our proposal, we've worked with the town, we believe that you should accept that.
Thank you. All right. So we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded by Helena Renwick. Yep. So, the motion is moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Helena Renwick. Be it resolved that minor variance application A51 2022 HTE be postponed to allow time for the applicant to work with staff on alternative options with less impact on lot coverage, side yard setbacks, and the environment. Is the mover okay with that? Absolutely. And the seconder? Then I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. All right. With that, we're moving on to the next application. Madeline is speaking to, I won't say the name, 263 Balsam Shoots.
Thank you, Chair Stone. Through you, the subject property is located at 263 Balsam Shoots Road. The lot is designated waterfront in Huntsville's official plan and zoned shoreline residential 1, with exception 1452 under Huntsville zoning bylaw. The subject lines are contained within the waterfront residential 60 meters precinct with a flood zone overlay in the community planning permit bylaw. An application has been submitted to permit the construction of a one-story detached garage on the lot. A minor variance is required to reduce the southern interior side yard setback from 6 meters to 3 meters for a 55 square meter one-story detached garage. The minor variance will be conditional on the owner revegetating the shoreline buffer and the owner maintaining existing vegetation along the south interior side lot line to provide visual screening. Both of these to be implemented through site plan control or community planning permit to the satisfaction of the town. The site-specific zoning on the lands has established that all openings and finished floor in habitable buildings shall be above 278 meters above sea level elevation contours. The proposed garage is sited outside of the natural resource zone and maintains a significant setback to the Muskoka River, and no habitable space has been proposed within the garage. In this instance, the setback reduction for the garage is due to the location of the existing septic, driveway, and large rocked area on the lot. To ensure the purpose of the side yard setback is being met, a condition has been added to maintain the existing vegetation along the southerly side yard. This will not only maintain visual screening, but will ensure no vegetation is lost along this portion of the property. The garage is also proposed in an area that is already cleared from vegetation. A Class 3 permit approval would be required to authorize a variation from this requirement for this proposal. Having regard to the provision of the CPP bylaw, staff would recommend approval of the proposed variation in this instance if the CPP bylaw was in effect. Looking at the official plan, the waterfront designation anticipates linear low-density shoreline residential development that respects the character and natural setting of the waterfront area. The garage has been designed to fit within the limits of the lot and does not dominate the landscape nor the existing development within the area. In this instance, the garage is sited more than 30 meters away from the shoreline, mitigating any risks to Type 1 fish habitat and being appropriately placed to be visually screened from view along the river. A condition has been added for the owners to revegetate the shoreline buffer to meet town policies. This will not only restore the shoreline to a natural state, but will also assist in providing additional screening. The proposal does not require vegetation to be cleared from the lot, and a condition has been added to ensure vegetation along the south interior side lot line remains. As a portion of the property is identified as flood hazard, the garage is proposed outside of this area and no habitable space is permitted unless elevations are confirmed to be above 278 meters above sea level. The owner has also confirmed that there is no intention to have habitable space and the garage is proposed for storage purposes. In review of this, the proposal is keeping with the character of the lot and surrounding waterfront residential character. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, and the application would appear to conform to the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Additionally, the application appears to satisfy the 4 tests for a minor variance as set out in the Planning Act and therefore staff are recommending approval. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll call on the applicant or representative to make any comments. If you have something to say? Can you tell me your last name?
Never had to pronounce it or spell it. Osterheist, Dave Osterheist.
Thank you. Thank you. Then I will go to members of the public, either present or electronically, to make comments about this application.
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
Thank you. Committee members, comments or questions? Seeing none. Moved by Helena Renwick, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that minor variance application A 52, 2022 HTE be approved. The purpose and effect of which is to provide relief from subsections 5.3.47 of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2008 66P in order to reduce the minimum required southern interior side yard setback from 6 meters to 3 meters for a 55 square meter, one-story detached garage. Conditional on the owner revegetating the shoreline buffer, the owner maintaining existing vegetation along the southerly interior side lot line to provide visual screening, both to be implemented through site plan control or the community planning permit to the satisfaction of the town. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Madeline, you're still with us for the Clark application.
Thank you, Chair Stone. Through you, the subject property is located at 1424 Muskoka Road 3 North. The lot is designated rural in Huntsville's official plan and zoned rural residential under Huntsville zoning bylaw. The subject lands are contained within the rural residential precinct in the community planning permit bylaw. The application is to permit the construction of 2 deck additions, a front porch addition, and a new larger garage on the lot. The existing attached garage is proposed to be demolished and a larger garage constructed in its place. A minor variance is required to increase the maximum permitted primary lot coverage from 10% to 11%, reduce the southerly interior side yard setback from 5 meters to 0.7 meters for the southwest corner of the proposed garage addition, and reduce the southern interior side yard setback from 5 meters to 4.25 meters for the southeastern corner of the proposed garage addition, all to permit the construction of a 96 square meter attached garage, 2 deck additions measuring 22.2 meters squared and 5.6 meters squared respectively, and a 5.6 meter squared front entrance addition. The minor variance is conditional on accessory lot coverage being decreased to 4%, the owner removing the tarp shed, and the owner maintaining existing vegetation along the rear and south interior side yard to provide visual screening. In this case, the proposed garage addition is sited on an angle which follows the current layout of the dwelling. The garage addition will not exceed the height limits of the zone and is maintaining a large front yard setback from Muskoka Road 3 North. To ensure overdevelopment does not incur on the lot, a condition has been added to reduce accessory lot coverage to 4%. This will balance the 1% increase in primary lot coverage, ensuring that development does not exceed the 15% coverage for both primary and accessory combined. Despite the relief being sought, it is noted that the proposal will not likely result in any significant new impact to abutting landowners. Additionally, maintaining a vegetative buffer along the rear and south interior side yards adjacent to the proposal have been added as conditions to maintain screening. A Class 3 permit would be required to authorize the variations from lot requirements proposed in this instance. Having regard to the provision of the CPP bylaw, staff would recommend that the proposed variation be approved if the CPP bylaw was in effect. Looking at the official plan, the rural designation, which is generally characterized by low-density development, serviced by private water and sewer in a natural setting where built form does not dominate the landscape, and based on the configuration of the lot, the garage is in keeping with the character of the rural area. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, and the application would appear to conform to the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Additionally, the application appears to satisfy the 4 tests for a minor variance as set out in the Planning Act, and therefore staff are recommending approval. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll call on the applicant's representative.
Thank you. John P. Gallagher, John P. Gallagher and Associates, 24 Hibbard Road, Huntsville, P1H1C9, representing Wayne Clark today. Madeline has explained the application quite well. There's just a couple of points that I just want to touch base on. In the location where the larger garage is proposed, there was a tent structure at one time and the retaining wall was still there. With the exception, you'll notice that we've asked for 2 reductions, one for going to 0.7 and the other going to 4.25. And what that does, that'll just ensure that the building isn't sneaking closer to the neighbors because it's on the an off angle from the lot line. You have this differences of side yard setbacks. So we put that in there specifically. As well, in that situation, the house on the property closest to that is about 85 feet away from the property line there. My client has no issue with maintaining the vegetation along that side. He has a significant vegetative buffer along 11B up at the north end and on the south end as well. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have, and we would ask that you support staff in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call on any members of the public online because we have no one else in the gallery. Is there anyone there?
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
Wonderful, thank you. Committee members, comments or questions? Seeing none. Moved by Helena Renwick, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that minor variance application A53-2022 HTE be approved. Purpose and effect of which is to provide relief from subsections 5.2.411 and 14 of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2008-66P in order to increase the maximum permitted primary lot coverage from 10% to 11%, reduce the southern interior side yard setback from 5 meters to 0.7 meters for the southwestern corner of the proposed garage addition, and reduce the southern interior side yard setback from 5 meters to 4.5 meters for the southeastern corner of the proposed garage addition. All to permit the construction of a 96 square meter attached garage, 2 deck additions measuring 22.2 square meters and 5.6 square meters respectively, and a 5.6 square meter front entrance addition, conditional on accessory lot coverage being decreased to 4%, the owner removing the tarp shed, and the owner maintaining existing vegetation along the rear and southern interior side yard to provide visual screening. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's carried. All right, I believe Kelsey is coming to speak to the next application, which is Cantor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 98 Hoodstown Shores Road. The lot is designated waterfront and is zoned Shoreline Residential 1. The Town of Huntsville Community Planning Permit Bylaw was passed by Council in July 2022, but is currently under appeal and is not yet in full force and effect. The subject lands are contained within the waterfront residential precinct, 60 meters within the CPP bylaw, and a Class 3 permit would be required to authorize the proposal and a technical report as submitted in this instance. The application has been submitted to permit the construction of a 20 square meter attached deck addition to an existing single detached dwelling. A minor variance is required to reduce the minimum side yard setback abutting type 1 fish habitat from 30 meters to 23 meters, and reduce the setback from a warm water stream located on the south side of the dwelling from 20 meters to 11 meters for the deck addition. So I'll just highlight, there's the proposed deck, and there is the setback from the warm water stream, and there's the setback from the type 1 fish habitat. It should be noted that this application came to us through site plan, so we did flag that the stream was identified and asked for a study, in which case they did find that it was a warm water stream through the fish habitat study provided by Riverstone. The report concluded that the development of the covered porch is possible without negative impacts on fish habitat and with appropriate ground cover, plantings, and construction mitigation measures. A condition has been included in the recommendation to require that the applicant undertake the recommendations of the fish habitat assessment, which can be implemented through site plan control, should the variance be approved. The application was circulated in accordance to the Planning Act and to the Lake Vernon Association. A letter of support was received last night and circulated to committee this morning. And it was noted that building would like this setback pinned by a surveyor to ensure that it's in the appropriate location. Oops. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I'll call on the applicant or representative to make any comments. All right. And nobody online?
Chair Stone, I see one hand raised, and I will now bring them into the meeting.
Oh, wonderful.
A reminder to please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and to confirm your name and mailing address.
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you loudly, yes. I can't
great.
see you. Do you have your video on?
I'm not a Zoom guy, so let me see if I could get this set up. If not, just I don't have much to say. It's Brian Cantor, 98 Hoodstown Shores Road, P1H2J2. And Kelsey's presentation pretty much summed everything up. And I just want to let you guys know I was here if any questions or concerns.
All right, wonderful. And I will ask any members of the public that wish to speak to this application. Electronically raise your hand.
Chair Stone, I see no hands raised.
No hands raised. Committee members, comments or questions? I see none. Moved by Brandon Stapleton, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that minor variance application A 50-2022 HTE be approved. The purpose and effect of which is to provide relief from subsections 3.5.1 and 5.3.411 of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2008-66P in order to reduce the minimum required setback from type 1 fish habitat from 30 meters to 23 meters, and reduce the minimum required setback from a warm water stream located on the south side of the dwelling from 20 meters to 11 meters, both for a 20 square meter attached garage addition to an existing dwelling, an existing single detached dwelling. Conditional on all the recommendations contained within the fish habitat assessment prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, Inc., dated May 27, 2022, being implemented through site plan control or the community planning permit system. What? I didn't say that? Oh, it's attached deck, not attached garage. Sorry. All right, if that's clear, comments or questions? All in favor? Shazam. All right. Now that all comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications to be concluded. I will now move to the non-public portion of the meeting. If the applicant or their agent wishes to make comments regarding their application, they may do so after the staff presentation. And Kelsey, you are speaking to the Bird application.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chair. Through you, the subject property is located at 3262 Old Muskoka Road. The lot is designated rural and is zoned rural residential. The purpose and effect of the consent application is to create one new rural residential lot with an area of approximately 2 hectares with a frontage of 109 meters on Old Muskoka Road. The retained lot would have an area of approximately 2 hectares and frontage of 110 meters on Old Muskoka Road. So I've just highlighted the severed lands, the proposed severed lands, and the proposed retained lands, which have development on it currently. As staff are unable to recommend approval of this application, it has been brought forward to you today. To protect rural character, growth is encouraged to be compatible with rural infrastructure and protect valuable natural resources and constraints common in the rural area. Official plan policies therefore discourage fragmentation of rural lands into small land holdings that are difficult and costly to service and conflict with other uses. As such, small lot frontages and areas are discouraged in new lot creation and that do not comply with the official plan policies of 134 meters of frontage and 2 hectares. These policies promote fiscally responsible planning for the rural area and community as a whole by simultaneously discouraging unsustainable development patterns such as ribbon sprawl and strip development by steering growth instead towards designated intensification areas where services and infrastructure exist or are planned. Therefore, the creation of an undersized rural residential lot is not supported by our official plan. Further development in the immediate area consists of large rural lots with larger frontages and a smaller lot with insufficient frontage would not be in keeping with the rural character. The town of Huntsville Community Planning Permit Bylaw was passed in July and is currently under appeal, as you guys know. The subject lands are contained within the rural residential precinct of the Community Planning Permit Bylaw. Lot requirements for land within the rural residential precinct include a minimum area of 2 hectares and a minimum frontage of 134 meters. A Class 3 permit would be required. However, having regard for the CPP permit and the policies contained within the official plan, staff would not recommend approval under the community planning permit either. The application was circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. One letter of objection was received and was circulated to committee yesterday. In view of the analysis of our policy and the proposal, the application would appear not to conform with the policies of the official plan, nor be consistent with the provincial policy statement. As such, staff are recommending denial. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. The applicant's representative would like to speak.
Thank you. John P. Gallagher, and I'm here on behalf of Mr. Bird and his daughter and son-in-law, the Moores, Wally Moore's son. Part of this application is to allow a young family to build a house on their father-in-law's property there. I think Kelsey has described the application. There are a number of points that I want to touch base on. I was at the last meeting here with Mr. Serreris at his application on Lindgren Road, and it seemed as though there was support for development, even though it might not wedge completely into the frontage number. With these lots, the acreage is quite significant at 5 acres. The frontage of the lots at 109 is is fairly large in relation to other lots in the area. You have to remember, most of Old Muskoka Road was created with 60-meter lots and 2.5-acre lot size. The committee approved severances up around the corner at 60 meters frontage last year on the Domtar Road at the Old Muskoka Road. And I think that was a smart decision. I do not concur with staff's opinion of the policy of the official plan. There's a number of policies, and all the policies had to be read, and they can't be read just in isolation, nor, as we've heard at the last meeting, the OP does have policy in there for dealing with numbers, basically saying that they should be acting as guidelines. So with this property, I take a look to the rural policies 824. Development in the rural designation is characterized by extremely low density. Lots are generally large, with development occupying a very small part of the lot. Small lot frontages, area setbacks are not typical in a rural area. It should be serviced by municipal water and sewer, close proximity to existing transportation routes, and the built form does not. In this instance, there's ample room on a 5-acre lot to place a building, septic, and amenity area. It would not interfere with the ridge line or tree line. 2 acres is a significantly large lot, and as most of the lots along Old North Road were created at 60 meters, this is almost double at 109, 110 meters frontage. The lot size is in character with the lots in the area. It makes efficient use of the existing infrastructure, being Old Muskoka Road. The severed and retained lot sizes would be greater than 1 hectare. The minimum lot size envisioned, this is the minimum lot size envisioned in the OP. All the setbacks for the RR zone will be maintained and met, and it will maintain the rural appearance. Staff had made comments that it's not financially responsible development, but we have a municipal road that's currently having plowing operations, upgrading, school busing, hydro. I understand the gas is in the area, etc. So all these services are already provided. It is in close proximity to the highway, which allows for commuting to either Bracebridge or Huntsville. In looking at 8.2.11, basically in order to protect the character, the built form should not dominate the natural landscape. The natural environment is intended to dominate. Vegetation should be retained, supplement existing vegetation. Roads and driveways follow the contours of the land, and development setback from roads, which in this case would be, I believe, 12 meters, and native species. Given the extensive frontage and area, landscape will dominate the built form. The owner is looking to retain as much vegetation as possible. The building location will meet the zoning bylaw with respect to setbacks and other regulations, and the lot line will respect the setback under the OBC for the septic system. 8.7.1 states that rural residential development is comprised of single detached dwellings located on large lots which front on existing year-round maintained publicly owned roads. And these are large lots at 2 hectares frontage. They ask that they be encouraged to locate where there's existing rural residential development. There is. Fronting on a year-round road. There is. Access is available to community facilities. Utterson Community Hall is just up the road. Services, police, ambulance, fire are all available currently, and the road is being maintained. It's not a remote area. Has good access to schools. Port Sydney schools across the way, the Christian schools up the street. And with respect to the district official plan, they set their lot size at 1 hectare. They do say that the minimum lot area should be no smaller than 1 acre, but they should be at least 1 hectare. And The lots do exceed 1 acre, and they exceed 1 hectare. Each of them is just over 2 hectares in size. The frontage and lot size can easily allow for a dwelling, septic, and amenity without any impact on any environmental features, because there really aren't any on the site. Both lots front on a year-round road. The district has provided a comment letter that this application conforms with the district official plan. With respect to the provincial policy statements, it allows proper use of the existing infrastructure. It provides employment opportunities. It provides affordable housing, because a father is severing off a lot for his daughter and her husband and their family and their kids. The use of private water and sewer in the rural area is an appropriate means of servicing. The road is already being maintained, school buses are already traveling, garbage, etc. It would allow for additional tax revenue to the municipality without having to increase services beyond where the current road network is. The province has been very vocal on trying to get homes built. We all know there's a problem with affordable housing. We know that sometimes the rules need a little bit of maneuvering, which the power of making decisions is afforded to you to do that. We would ask that you support this young family in their hopes to build a house on this new vacant lot. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, committee members, any comments or questions? Helena Renwick.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I would like, it's a comment, but I think when I look at this application, and I think we have to remember these are people that live in our community, and that we are here to support these people that are, looking for places to live, looking to extend. This family is increasing the square foot, or is dividing their lot up. I would have to agree. I would have to agree that the footage on the road is sufficient, and I think that we are looking for ways for young families to have a place to live, and I think that we should agree with this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Ooh. Oh, sorry. You're so small, I couldn't see you. Mr. Donald.
Thank you, Chair Stone. You should look for the shiny head. I have a question for clarification to Kelsey. The excuse me. In the letter of objection, there is reference to a lot size of 4 hectares, and it quotes section 8.2.20. In Kelsey's documentation or presentation, it refers to section 8.2.18, which says that new lots should be no less than 2 hectares. Can you explain the discrepancy between, or the disparity between those two sections, Kelsey?
Thanks. Kelsey?
Thank you for the question, Member Donald, and through you, Mr. Chair. There's 2 sections within the official plan. One is for new rural lots, and that's in conformity with our rural zoning, which is 4 hectares and 134 meters of frontage, which is correct. These lots, however, are zoned rural residential, so the requirement is a different provision, which is 2 hectares and 134 meters of frontage. That's why often when there's a rural lot and it's being severed, we often have to rezone it as well. But in this case, the lands are already zoned rural residential.
All right. Is that satisfactory, Mr. Donald?
Yeah, sorry. I'm having trouble with my mute button. Yeah, if I may, so, excuse me. If I may, then a follow-up question to Kelsey. So in essence, we are really dealing with the requirements of the road allowance, which is essentially 110 meters available versus 134 meters as a requirement. That's all we're really talking about in this situation. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Member Donald.
Thank you. Then I think I support Ms. Rennick's comments that 110 meters seems to be sufficient or adequate, in my opinion.
Yes, Richard. Sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just felt I should clarify one item that Ms. Rennick brought up, and that is the town does have policies that would allow for an existing lot to have a secondary residential dwelling unit on it. So you don't necessarily have to create a new lot in order to provide the affordable housing. There are now provisions that would allow you to put a secondary residential dwelling unit on an existing lot. And one of the changes we've made through the community planning permit bylaw would actually allow you to have up to 2 units on an existing lot. So I just wanted to point that out, that you don't actually have to go through this process to provide the housing you're talking about.
Thanks. Mr. Gallagher, your comments.
Just in regards to that, the house is currently owned by the father, but he doesn't live in that house. He lives in PEI. So chances are, when they build, there will not be the opportunity to put a secondary suite unless it's on their new property.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I think during the economic times we're experiencing that sometimes a secondary suite can be restrictive in funding availability. So, you know, in essence, we have this housing shortage, and are we addressing all the needs in this? I think probably not. I would tend to agree that this new lot creation would not be out of character for the neighborhood. I went on the mapping and measured frontage on 5 other lots within a very short distance of there, and they're actually less than that in frontage. I think I would agree for a motion to approve.
All right. I believe Kelsey wants to make a comment.
Just a point of clarification, thank you, Chair Stone, that there are costs associated also with developing a property, such as development fees, construction fees. I just thought that'd be important to flag just if we were comparing those 2 options.
All right, thank you. We have a motion on the floor to approve this application. Is there a seconder? Mr. Stapleton. All right. I'm going to wait for Crystal to work her magic. So it's Jason. All right, the motion reads, moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Brandon Stapleton. Be it resolved that the word deny be struck out and replaced with approve. And further, that the following be inserted at the end of the motion. Conditional on a registered description of the severed lot being submitted to the Secretary Treasurer, including all rights of ways and easements, along with a registered copy of a reference plan, the owner's taxes being in good standing, a site inspection fee of $240 being paid to the town of Huntsville, a consent finalization fee in the amount of $190 being paid to the town of Huntsville, and 5% cash in lieu of parking being paid to the town of Huntsville on the severed lands. Does that meet with your approval, mover and seconder? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. All right. Oh. All right. And the main motion as amended, all in favor? There we go, carried. Okay. So with that, we're at the end. Moved by Brandon Stapleton, seconded by Jason Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 10:35. Was there something else? Oh, yes. So before we do that, this is our last meeting. Thank you for our last meeting, and we have three lay members, which I want to say thank you for all your work. You've learned a whole lot about planning, I'm sure, and it's a big job being on planning. So I thank you very much. Councillor Fitzgerald, I also thank you. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, if I could, I just wanted to thank everyone for lots of interesting stuff, lots of critical input, and just putting your time in learning and being here. I appreciated it, working with all of you.
Yep, absolutely. And getting your heart rate up when it gets controversial. All right. Moved by Brandon Stapleton, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 10:36 a.m.